Hello Earth people, this is Creatively Torn, a channel where I mostly talk about books, but sometimes don't. This time I'm not talking about books, at least not books that I've read. This one's a bit different. This one is going to be my history as a writer. Okay, so like I mentioned, this video is going to be a little bit different than anything I've posted so far. So most of the time I'm talking about books that I've read, whether it's a review or a list or something like that. But this one is going to be talking about writing instead. So in my 2023 goals video that I made back in December, I noted that I wanted to do more content this year about writing and art and other things besides books. Because I do have a lot of interests, a lot of creative interests, hence why my channel name is called Creatively Torn. So I figured it's high time to get cracking on some of that different kind of content. And so I figured it was probably the best idea to start with my history as a writer. You know, how I started writing, things I typically write, and what I envision for my future as a writer. So without further ado, let's go back to the beginning. So the early years, I started writing in grade school like a lot of people did in class when they were teaching us to write and, to think about things. So I mostly wrote like little poems about bugs and food and things. Nothing really too earth-shattering there. But then in third grade, we had a period, I think it was every day or maybe it was just once a week, where we had like an hour or so just to write whatever we wanted. And so I ended up writing a lot of books, which were just little stories that I typed out and printed out and then illustrated. Most of those were about weirder things. I was into weird stuff like ghosts and goosebumps when I was a kid, so most of the stuff I wrote about was things like that. So one of the stories I wrote was about a baseball game that got invaded by an alien spaceship. Some of the aliens came down and they had to play baseball against the baseball teams or something. Another one was about an abandoned swimming pool in the bottom of grade school, which made absolutely no sense, but it was, kind of weird. Another one I made was actually a couple different books in a series that I wrote with one of my friends. It was about mice, a group of mice that went around causing trouble. So one of the stories was them in a toy store after hours, just going around and playing with toys. And then the other one was them in a bakery. So you can imagine what they did in a bakery. So those are kind of fun. Kind of stretched my creative muscles, both with writing and with drawing, because I did illustrate those as well. But when I was a kid, most of my artistic side was spent on drawing, so that's how I spent most of my time rather than writing. That was until probably around 7th or 8th grade when I started to dabble into writing song lyrics. They were really stupid. I just wanted to try some different things out because I was getting into some different music at the time. So, and then after that, in junior high, the only things I really did was I was into a lot of fantasy at the time. So I was into Lord of the Rings, and into anime too, like Dragon Ball Z and Yu Yu Hakusho, and Harry Potter. So I was coming up with ideas for like a fantasy series, whether it was a book or a cartoon or something. I don't know. I just started coming up with titles and characters and drawing the characters and things. So it wasn't a whole lot of writing involved in that, but there was a little bit. And that is a project that I will revisit in the future. That really takes me into high school, where I was in class. I was taking some different composition classes to fill up my English credits. And so in those classes, I really learned how to write effectively and write descriptively. I learned how to really channel my feelings into writing. So that's what I spent most of my time doing in those classes, was trying to channel the feelings that I was going through into, poetry or whatever. I did have a lot of different emotions and feelings to deal with in high school, so it was good to put those down on the paper. And so most of what I wrote back then was poetry. Unless it was for a class when we had to write, a story or an essay or something. But that's really when my love for writing really took really took off was in high school, when I really learned how to write more effectively. Kind of rekindled or kindled my love for reading, or love for writing. I did write a fair number of poetry in high school. And then after high school, straight after that, I went to community college in town, whereas most of the people from my class would end up going to a university out of town. There wasn't a whole lot of interaction for me that year socially, so I dealt with a lot of depression and isolation those first couple of years after high school, and so I ended up channeling a lot of those feelings into more poetry, writing a lot more darker stuff. I did dabble into short stories as well for really the first time outside of classes. I wrote a couple of different things, couple things for different websites online, different forums. So that was a nice experiment. I really got my feet under me for writing stories then. Let's go forward a couple years. After community college, I did transfer to a 4-year school, and there once again I had to complete a few more credits to graduate, so I had to take a couple more writing classes. I think that's where I really got really good at writing, I think, or at least as good as I've gotten now. Just learning different techniques for coming up with ideas and different ways to portray themes and portray characters in writing. So I ended up writing a good number of short stories and microfiction and some prose pieces for those classes. I did submit a few of those to some different literary magazines for our school. None of them were really accepted, so that's about the end of that. That really takes care of the past portion of the video here. Kind of flash forward to now. I haven't done a whole lot since then. I don't have any classes right now to rekindle my energy. So when I do write, it's in my free time, which admittedly is not as much as I would like to have. I do have a career or a job. I don't know. Career is kind of hoity-toity. I do have a job, 2 jobs actually. None of them really involve writing. But the passion for writing has always been there. So I do that occasionally. From time to time, I come up with a couple occasional lines of poetry that I'll think of and I'll write down in a notebook. I'll come up with a title or some cool character names or an idea for a story. Most of the times I don't really do much with those though. I just don't have a lot of time to sit down and kind of develop these ideas. Last year, I did do a fair bit of writing. I have a number of short stories that I did start a couple of years ago, whether they're for classes or for websites or whatever. Some of which I want to redo entirely. Some of which I just want to, fix up and do a little more editing on. Then there's a couple that I think are fairly well done, but I would just want to get them released somehow. Then there's a few more ideas for stories that I'd started that I haven't gotten too far into yet. But last year I did get a good about a month in of writing, so that was nice. But then I kind of stopped for about a week, and then I never went back. So unfortunately, these days I don't have any more free time than I did last year. So that's really hard to get into that mode, especially since I picked up reading, done a whole lot of that in the past year. But I do think that reading is beneficial. If you're going to be a writer, you need to know what's been written, and you need to kind of research your favorite authors and some of the greatest authors, just to figure out how they developed their ideas and wrote their stories. I think that's a proper step in writing, is to study other people's work. So it's not entirely a waste of time for me, I don't think. So that really leads me into where I am now, which, like I said, I have a few short stories that I want to finish up, a few I want to properly write and then a few more I just want to release somehow. I'm not quite sure how I want to do those. A few of them that I have finished up, I have posted online, and they have appeared in different magazines just for the school that I work for. So spinning those to, professional magazines is probably not going to work for those, but I still want to get them released in some format. I don't know how I want to do that yet, whether it's just a collection of short stories and poetry that I put on my website, or I throw up on Amazon or Google or whatever. That's one of the things I need to work on to decide and figure out what I want to do. So once I do finish up the short stories that I am working on, I do want to submit those to magazines. Hopefully get those accepted. That would be great. If not, then I'll put those into a collection as well and release those however I decide to do that. Once I kind of finish up that slate of short stories, I want to work on a few ideas for longer length stories, novels that I want to start. I have a couple of small ideas that I need to work through to figure out if those would work well as a longer story or not. But like I said, I want to finish up the things I'm working on now before I start any of that, just to clear up my mind per se. One of the things I need to figure out is if I want to try traditional publishing or do self-publishing. There are obviously drawbacks and benefits to either one. So one of the things about doing self-publishing is that I can do the book design and cover myself, theoretically. I haven't done that a whole lot, but I know it's possible for me to do, so I could save money there if I did that by myself. But on the drawback, I don't have much of a following, so the chances that anything I release self-published would not have a very large audience at the beginning. So, and I also don't have basically any money to work with, so that's another drawback. So these are the things I need to do more research on and kind of come up with a game plan for how I want to go about these things. So kind of my goals and my interest in writing was that basically writing has always been the way that I express myself. I've always been into art and drawing. Both those have just been things I like to do. I don't really see those as ways I express myself artistically. It's always been writing that I do that. Obviously not speaking. I do like writing poetry and playing around with different poetry ideas. There's not much of a market for that, I know, but it's something I like to do regardless. I do want to write some full-length novels. I think my roots are in horror, so that might be where I look to first, but I do want to try some different things, such as sci-fi, maybe fantasy, whatever else strikes me, I guess. Obviously, I would love to make a living with my writing, so I could quit my 2 current jobs and just write full-time. That would be a pipe dream. But more realistically, I just want to get my stuff out there, just to share that with the world. Just to say that I have things out there in the world that people can read and enjoy, hopefully. So that's really where I am now. I've got a few things I need to finish up and need to come up with a plan for a way to release them. And I need to carve out time to do more writing. So that's basically what the status of my writing job is. I don't know. My status as a writer is. Just need to get going on these things. But that's pretty much all I have for today, though. So if you have any experience with self-publishing or traditional publishing, or if you know of any good resources, feel free to let me know in the comments or wherever. And if you have any content ideas for future writing videos, feel free to let me know those as well, because I'm always struggling with ideas to come up with for content to emphasize writing over reading. So I do appreciate any ideas you have for me. But that being said, this is where this chapter is going to end. So thank you for listening to me ramble on once again. And I promise not to leave this video on a cliffhanger.